This story happened when my husband and I had just moved into our new home in a quiet suburb. Both of us made good income, so life was pretty comfortable. We'd been married for about 2 years now, and after deciding that we wanted to have a child, James, my husband, and I decided that we didn't want to raise a family in Chicago where we had been staying for a while. After a bit of searching, we found a beautiful traditional home and moved in as soon as possible. The neighborhood looked like a replica from that show, Sharp Objects, and I would be lying if I said that I didn't try to role play as Amy Adams every time I drove around town. Both my husband and I had remote jobs, which was a good thing because this wasn't the sort of place for the kind of work that we did. It was a really charming town, especially in comparison to our years working in really competitive environments for most of our careers. I was in my mid 30s, my husband was close to 40. Yeah, we married a bit late, but that was the way things were. Life in the suburbs was beautiful. You aren't able to appreciate how beautiful something as simple as silence can be until you come down to a place like this. The mornings are dreamy with the sound of birds. I remember the night after we first moved in. The early morning sunlight in the silence was one of the prettiest things I ever experienced. It was only on the weekends that the charm would be broken a little bit, as people would mow their lawns at like 6 a.m. It was a bit annoying, but it wasn't something that a pair of earplugs wouldn't fix. The weather was good, the people were nice, and though it was simple living, it was a considerably expensive area. The people were also great for the most part, being warm and welcoming when we first moved in, and ensuring that we felt at home in the community. However, I guess there's no such thing as a complete happiness in this world, and our life was soon to be plagued, albeit for a short time, by a racist Karen. Now, something to remember is that you can't avoid people as you do in a city. If you want to avoid one person, you end up avoiding all of them because everyone hangs out in the same malls, churches, bars. This is one of the main downsides, in my opinion, to suburban life. You can't really disappear like you can in a big city. Anyways, Karen was the woman who lived opposite our home. She was in her mid-50s and lived with her husband and 4 children. On the day that we moved in, she had come out to watch us, and when we waved at her, she just nodded back without a smile. It was obvious that she was looking us over, trying to evaluate us in some way. Later that evening, I was walking around the house, putting things in place, and I glanced out the window and noticed from the corner of my eye Karen watching me from her home. She was standing behind her curtains, and the room was dark, but she'd forgotten to turn off her TV, and I could see her silhouette against the light. This creeped me out, and I drew the curtains and told my husband, "Aw, she's probably just curious to see an interracial couple. They probably don't see too many in a small town like this." I forgot to mention, my husband is black and I'm white. No one even seemed to care here though, but maybe Karen was going to be an exception. The next morning, we woke up at 6 a.m. We had a long day ahead of us, and we made a list of tasks that each of us would do. James was going to find us some fiber internet so that we could get working by the weekend, and I was going to pick up groceries for the next week or two. James showered and left at 8 a.m., and I left about an hour after that. As I closed the door behind me, I got the feeling that I was being watched again, and I turned around to see Karen standing in her doorway, openly watching me. I decided to make some conversation and clear the air, so I walked up to her with a wave and said, "Hi, my name is Mia. I just moved in from Chicago." "Ah, big city people, is it?" she replied with a tone that tried to conceal her dripping disgust. Yep. How long have you lived here?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation as cordial as possible. 15 years. I raised my eyebrows. "Wow, you must be familiar with what happens in this place then." "I do." She was staring at me coldly and looked like she didn't want to make conversation, so I said, "Well, I gotta be on my way then." I turned to leave and she asked, "What do you do?" "I'm a data analyst," I reply. "What is that?" "Oh, I study data and find out how... Uh-huh. How much does it pay?" "I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable sharing that information." Anyway, it's been nice talking to you. Is that black man your husband? Yes, he is. He is James. I've really got to go now. Bye. She did the same head nod that she did when I first saw her and stands at her door as I walk back to the car. She was still staring as I drove away. Geez, what was with this woman? I find the supermarket and start shopping. It's a pretty big place, and I sort of get lost in it and pick up quite a bit more than I had initially planned. When I'm done, I realized I should have taken James' pickup truck since my little hatchback was pretty small. Whatever didn't fit in the trunk was stuffed in the back seat and was quite visible. I drove around the town, exploring it a bit more, and stopped by a small cafe for some coffee and bagels. By the time I returned home, I was in a great mood. I'd forgotten all about Karen's weird questions and was looking forward to a movie night with James. I asked James how his day went, and he mentions that he would be getting fiber internet in a few days. So we had a little more breathing space until our busy work lives resumed. Even though it was work from home, the hours were pretty long, and with lots of meetings and calls. I had really been enjoying these few days of free time, and I convinced my husband to spend some simply enjoying the new environment before we got locked into our computers. As we went to bed, I mentioned the weird interaction that I had with Karen earlier in the day. James was once again dismissive and told me not to overthink it and that every suburban area had someone that was a little kooky. I figured he was right, but things turned out to get so much more complicated than that. The next day, James and I went out to explore the town together and meet up with someone who had invited us for lunch. We had spent a great day, and by the time that we got home, James was asleep in the car. I was driving since he had a few glasses of wine. I pulled into the driveway and was unlocking the door when I see Karen crossing the road and going back to her home. She had come from the same area as our house, and I suspected that she had been trying to snoop around. I woke James up and got him inside. I didn't want to tell him about Karen again because he would think I was crazy, but I had to investigate. Once James was asleep, I went down to the backyard and noticed that it was unlocked. That was my mistake. I went inside, trying to see if I could spot anything weird, but it all looked fine. I went back out again and looked around when I noticed it. The window that I knew was shut was partially open now. Just a smidge. It was obvious someone had been trying to open it a little as possible to peer inside. Frickin' Karen. What the hell was she up to? I knew her full name because I saw it written next to her front door for some reason. I decided to go inside and do some good old online sleuthing to see what I could find, and what I found shocked me. At first, I could only find her Pinterest profile, but then I found her Facebook profile, where she seemed to post almost every hour about the most obscenely racist crap that you could imagine. It was shocking because I thought Facebook took down profiles like that. This wasn't one of those times when people accuse fans of Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan for being racist. No, she was full-on white robe racist. The latest post that I saw was a few hours ago, and was about how a new couple had moved in opposite to her, and she was disgusted to see a white woman married to a black man and becoming a race traitor. I felt like throwing up when I saw something that shocked me even more. At the end of her post, there was a picture of me and my husband. Not just any picture, it was a photo of the two of us that was hung in our living room. She also commented in her replies to others about how she felt sorry for our kids if we had any. It made my stomach turn reading some of the comments. I rang my husband up and showed him what I saw. He was stunned and speechless. It felt like we were living next door to a KKK member, and I was actually beginning to fear for my safety. We took screenshots and got in contact with the Homeowners Association. They were equally stunned by what we showed them. They promised to address the matter, and they did. That evening, we got a call from them that they were going to go the legal route and seek to evict Karen. They sincerely apologized on behalf of the community and told us that they were sorry for this experience that we had to go through after moving into their community. That evening, it was my turn to watch. I stood there as she opened her door and enjoyed her hilarious meltdown. The other neighbors came out on hearing her screaming and got a treat of her calling me a race traitor as she was escorted by the police. I had pressed charges against her for breaking into my home as well. You aren't the only one who can spy on someone, witch. She lost her job as a schoolteacher and her family disappeared and moved away soon after. I'm glad that I was able to catch this quickly, and it didn't escalate into me having to deal with her racism for months on end. I never had to deal with anything like that again in the community, and James and I had our first child a few months back, a girl. Backstory: I have worked in the wastewater industry for going on 10 years now. The first wastewater plant that I worked at was for a small town. They were pretty old school, with no internet, no computer, or time clock. My boss would just fill out the time slips and turn them in each week. We only had 3 employees, including myself, so it was easy record keeping, but completely on my boss's honor system. I would always get to work early, unlock all the buildings, calibrate the lab equipment, and start any machines that needed to be started. Hours 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. I would usually be there at 6:30 if not earlier. I would do the snow plowing so they would allow me to come in earlier and plow and leave after my 8 hours if I didn't want the overtime. My boss regularly came in late, usually 2 times a week, anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour. A couple of times I would have an appointment for 3:30 and leave work at 3 to get there. Since I'm there 30 minutes prior to work starting, I figured, no big deal. Did it twice a month, and after the second time, my boss reprimanded me by docking my pay and sent me a memo to our sewer authority stating that I was leaving work early. I said, I understand and I won't do it again. I was royally pissed, but I had a good job and didn't want to piss off the sewer authority members who didn't fully understand our work environment. We were in the process of doing some upgrades at the plant, so a lot of construction crews were in and out with equipment. So I decided to prove a point. I started forgetting my keys to the plant's gate every now and then. On the second time I forgot my keys, my boss decided to show up to work at 8 a.m. I had maybe 5 cars behind me for an hour waiting to get to work at our plant when the vice chairman of our board drove by. When he asked me what was going on, I explained, I forgot my keys and was waiting on my boss to get there so we could get in. Needless to say, my boss got an earful from his bosses, and when he came to me, I explained our workday is from 7 to 3:30. I will not do anything work-related until 7 a.m. sharp. My boss must have got a new alarm clock because he was rarely late again. Jack owned his winery for a number of years. He loved wine and knows what makes a good wine. He's a regular wine drinker, even if not from his own winery. He will spend a fair bit of money buying good wine. Jack has this one friend, Richard, who would often invite him over for dinner. He would bring a bottle of wine every time, and being who he is, it was always a good bottle, often costing a pretty penny. Well, Richard had a habit of taking that bottle out the back, then serving a different bottle during dinner. He would pour everyone a glass of whatever household brand was on sale at the supermarket that week, and save the expensive bottle for a special occasion at another time. Understandably, this really annoyed Jack. After a few times, he decided he wasn't going to stand by and let this happen any longer. The next time that Richard extended the oh-so-generous invitation of a cooked dinner, Jack went to the cheapest, nastiest back alley store he could find. He asked the clerk to get the worst bottle of wine that he could muster. The clerk said that they had this one bottle for $3.50. $8 is a standard cheap bottle. As you can guess from the price tag, this was not a wine which aged well. Jack bought that little bottle of wine and dunked it in a pile of dust to make it look like a high-quality wine, which had been saved on a rack and collected dust over the years. Richard's dinner never tasted so good, with the taste of very petty revenge on the side. Well, a couple of weeks later, Richard called Jack up in a fury. He ranted into the phone and cussed him out, saying that he was dishonest and a terrible friend, giving him wine so sour it was almost rotten. Apparently, when he had finally deemed someone worthy enough of a decent bottle of wine, it was actually some really important person who he needed to impress, and that wine didn't make quite the statement that he hoped it would. Jack got a very satisfying chuckle. Edit 1, because there seem to be a lot of people that assume that their cultural norms are standard everywhere. This was Jack's contribution to the dinner. It is standard in New Zealand for people to bring something. It was clear to all parties that this was to be shared at the dinner. Richard was a cheeky prick trying to pocket all the expensive wine for himself. It was not a gift. So, me, 16-year-old male, and my two sisters, 11 and 13-year-old females, were on a day trip to Victoria, British Columbia with our mom. For context, I do have multiple part time jobs. I'm not rich by any means, but I do have some FU money saved up, which happened to be useful for this particular occasion. We stumbled across a macaron shop, and as you probably know, macarons are expensive as crap. I wanted only one because I was already pretty full at the time. And so I asked one of my sisters if they could spend $2 on a single macaron for me, as they were already buying like 4 of them for themselves. She refused, which was whatever for me because it is their money after all. However, what ticked me off is when she said in a snooty voice, "Oh, you're too poor to buy your own macarons. I feel bad for you." Okay, girl, game on. So, without a word, I went up to the counter and asked for a pack of 20 macarons. I went across the entire store picking out almost every single flavor they had available, and said confidently, "I'll have all of that on debit, please." They were speechless at first, but once they realized I was actually getting 20 macarons for myself, they started whining to mom and asking to have some, but she didn't care as it was my own money. All I said to them was, "Oh, you're too poor to get your own macarons?" And I walked off, eating my 20 macarons while they were stuck with their measly 4. Was it petty? Yes. Did I waste like $40 for essentially no reason? Also yes. Was it satisfying as crap to watch them squirm? Hell yeah. Edit. There seems to be this thing where people are assuming I got mad because my sisters wouldn't buy macarons for me. I tried to say that wasn't the case in the original post. I didn't really care about the macarons, and I did not care when she refused at first. It was when she started to rub it in my face when I got slightly ticked off. Also, what is it with people insinuating that I'm going down a bad path and will forever make a bad financial decision over macarons? This was a petty purchase. This sub's called Petty Revenge. My sister got over it pretty quickly, and we had a good laugh. I don't know what y'all are on about.